Hi, folks, this is Mark Merrill with Firm. The fight is on for rights under the law, not above it, according to the deflectocrats and the radical left. We have stories abounding for content today, folks, to be covered in our Firm Journal program. Among them, a weekly Maine Republican address that we really don't follow on a regular basis. However, this is one that is quite important to our young people in the state, especially students. Are they suddenly in the flux instead of where they need to be? And the content and curriculum that they should be studying. Plus, the Maine Policy Institute, one of our dedicated and I would say number one, if not number two, media watchdog organization in the entire state, is looking at a specific piece of information and legislation that passed a few years ago, about 8 years ago to be exact. And are we looking at smaller government? Big question marks, though, on that one. And lastly, from our Firm email and our links, we got President Trump's new laws for Christians. And it's all good, folks. Ever since he started delegating his authority after January 20th. First, right here at home in Maine, men and women of the law-abiding citizens and fellow taxpayers like myself, the Maine Policy Institute came out with a very interesting question to ponder over the past 7 to 9 days. Is the dream of smaller government coming true? Well, they say maybe not yet, but hosts of the Maine Policy Institute podcasts, Harris Pate and Jake Posick, gave all of us some insight in this brief portion on ranked choice voting from February 7th.
You look at what happened in this most recent election cycle, you have states like Idaho, Colorado, Nevada. There's a bunch of different states that shut it down.
Too, right?
Yeah, Missouri enacted a constitutional amendment to prohibit it from ever being used anywhere for any reason.
I like to call it the Don't You Dare Amendment.
Yeah.
Right, there are some states with localized versions. A lot of California localities use it, though they don't have a state-level provision. The only other state that does is Alaska, and they had a very, very close, came within a few hundred votes of being repealed ballot question.
Yeah, when you told me this morning that it failed, it's embarrassing to admit this, but that was the first I actually realized that it had actually failed. Last I had looked, a few days after election, or even a week after election day, it was still up by 200-300 votes, but I guess it ended up swinging the other way.
It was incredibly close. It was incredibly close.
They had to send the sled dogs up into the mountains to get every last ballot, and by the time they tallied them all, unfortunately, the effort to repeal failed there. But to Harris's point, I think there has been movement in a positive direction, and I don't know if it's just because of the debacle that we saw related to RCV being triggered for the Golden Ontario campaign, but I intended to testify this week, except I was sick, so I did not, but I've testified on this before, and plenty of time I've heard a Democrat on the VLA committee say, the will of the people, people voted for this. It's it's the equivalent of how Democrats consider things to be settled science, if you will. That's how they felt about ranked choice voting. So the fact that you have the Democratic Senate lead on that committee, Craig Hickman, was kind of entertaining the idea of, would you support kicking this out to the ballot? I like that better than what it is right now, which is this weird bifurcated system of having ranked choice voting apply to some things and not others, and you never know what the outcome of that would be, but I do think that there's a contingent of Mainers out there who supported this the first time around, who probably don't like things like not knowing who the winner of an election is in December, which was the case this time around. And I think that they see what's happening in other states, and they probably wonder to themselves, maybe this isn't the best system after all.
Indeed there, folks. All along the same thought lines on issues facing Maine people was the recent Republican weekly address to our citizens from State Representative, you see here now, Sheila Lyman of Livermore Falls, with her message on the tax and spend with low performance by our students. Not a good sign.
I'd be worried.
State Representative Sheila Lyman on the Republican response for
Maine students are in a race to the bottom. A 71% increase in education spending has not reversed a sharp decline in academic performance. This is Sheila Lyman of Livermore Falls with the weekly Republican address. Maine continues to get national attention for all the wrong reasons. Just last week, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, NAEP, released its results for 2024. NAEP measures the reading and mathematics proficiency of 4th grade and 8th grade students in American public schools. It is one of a handful of nationwide standardized tests that can be used by policymakers to evaluate the effectiveness of state public education systems. Maine was once a national leader in educating children. Now, Maine is a national leader in proving that higher spending does not result in improved academic performance. Since 2013, Maine spent 71% more per pupil, a total of $26,000 per student. After increased spending, Maine had the biggest drop in reading and math proficiency in the country, falling 10 percentage points since 2019. Just 33% of Maine 4th graders are proficient in math. Only 26% of those 4th graders were proficient in reading. Only 25% of 8th graders were proficient in math and 26% in reading. Before the pandemic, Maine's reading and math scores were higher than the national average. Maine's current education system is failing our kids. To begin to fix the problem, we need to start at the top. When the Biden and Mills administration pushed a political agenda, then put money behind it and attached strings, school districts had little choice but to comply. Many Maine teachers do not want to teach sex or politics, especially when it is not age appropriate. Teachers want to teach students the skills they need to succeed in life as productive, contributing citizens. That means focusing on reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Couldn't be said any better. And there was a lot more to Representative Lyman's information, or she went ahead with it. And we're going to go into that just a little bit further here, folks, on Firm. Welcome to our journal. We're talking about the fight for rights under the law, not above it. As we look at that particular information that came through to us here, folks, on a recent week, as she carried on with her address, as you heard her say, that focusing on more pertinent and academic subjects like reading, writing, and arithmetic, teachers want to teach students the skills they need to succeed in life. Well, the Commissioner of Education here in Maine made national news when she told lawmakers that traditional academic learning, the reading, writing, and math, should be a low priority, lower than social emotional learning and programming on race and gender. I'm not kidding, folks. And you know what? Here she is now in living color, and we get to pick on her because you know what? We went and looked up her bio. And we're going to read through the remainder of Representative Lyman's address first, because within days of taking office, the Trump administration acted swiftly to address that problem about having social emotional learning and programming on race and gender curriculum being more important and a higher priority than reading, writing, and mathematics. Several House Republicans called on the Maine Department of Education to comply with new federal guidelines from the Trump administration designed to protect children. We strongly support those important steps, they said, to protect our children, preserve fairness, maintain the integrity of sex-based distinctions, and renew focus on education, not just indoctrination, said the release. These executive orders are crucial in ensuring that the well-being of our children is safeguarded from policies that seek to divide, sow discontent, and contradict biological reality. We sincerely hope that the Commissioner and Department will rethink its initial response to that executive order and join American people across the nation in calling for a renewed focus on teaching our children the basics. Maine has proven that more money will not solve the problem. Well, so saith Janet Mills. Well, my gracious sakes. Janet Mills, what the heck does she know? Tyrant, dictator. Here's the deal with Janet Mills, folks. It's a little side note, but it's worth mentioning. We've had to put up with her for 2 terms, and it's not over yet. Not until she leaves office in 2026. But before she did, she made an example of not one, but at least 2 that I'm aware of, and maybe 3. Productive and crucial, vital business owners of restaurants in our southern part of our state that were forced to close because Janet Mills was ticked off about the fact that the COVID restrictions hadn't been lifted by Sir Chinese bootlicker Anthony Fauci. I'm spelling it all out here, folks. You may recall a Rick Savage who owned a restaurant, still does, as far as we're concerned, and we know, down near Sunday River in Bethel. Very popular. Had his license revoked, his liquor license revoked, because he wouldn't close his doors with 300 to 400 patrons waiting to go in and eat peacefully. Janet Mills, back in April, I believe, of 2020, or maybe early 2021, we'd have to go back and look at it specifically on the date. She ordered then, since Mr. Savage would not bow to her threats, she ordered the Oxford County Police Sheriff to shut him down, or she will revoke not only his liquor license, but close him down. Rick Savage wouldn't do it. And neither could the sheriff. So guess what? Mr. Savage went ahead and served the 300 to 400 people who were waiting in line outside of his restaurant. And more came because it was close to getting to be that time of tourism in the state. April, come on, people, you know. That meant at the time Memorial Day was just around the corner. One of our biggest income seasons in our entire state. Patrons were served. Seems to me if his liquor license was revoked, he could still serve his patrons and they could drink water or sodas. It's not liquor. You don't have to have a liquor license to sell those, folks. I don't even own a restaurant. This is the point of Janet Mills and the dictatorship of Aaron Fry and at the time Sarah Gideon, who was Secretary of State, and then it was Rachel Talbot Ross. Now someone else has decided to has replaced Rachel Talbot Ross. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he's sitting right there, laughing away as Janet Mills was poking jokes while American people starve and suffer, especially those on fixed incomes in this state. This is no laughing matter, Janet. You should be thrown out, and you should be imprisoned for breaking the laws of the Constitution, where the Maine Constitution is based on. But let's get into this lady here a little bit. after her statement that social awareness and politics are more important than reading and writing and math. Oh, really? Wait till you hear what the background is on this chick. And we're not going to hold back, folks. So this, ladies and gentlemen, this lady is a Pender Macon. Maybe you can't read it up here, but that is her name. And we're not going to go into details because, frankly, folks, she's not worth it. Across her more than 20-year career, Ms. Macon devoted herself to the mission of public education. And we're going to skip down a little bit here, is where she at one time started off as a classroom teacher in Westbrook, and she became principal of a REAL school in Mackworth Island in Falmouth, Regional Education Alternative Learning. Alternative should raise a flag. A position she held for more than 10 years. And as a principal, she also oversaw an alternative and service-based high school for students who had struggled in traditional school settings. She and her team supported high-risk students from 28, sending school districts through innovative academic and experiential programming. Not experimental, experiential. She served on Maine's Juvenile Justice Advisory Group since 2014. She also co-founded Collaborative for Perpetual Innovation, a professional development, technical assistance, and consulting company for educators, school and district leaders, and counselors. A consulting company, as well as professional development and technical assistance company. Ms. Macon served on a number of legislative work groups and committees seeking to improve educational opportunities for Maine students and to promote the work of Maine public schools. And she also provides training for educators and mental health professionals and speaks at state and national conferences on topics such as, get your pen and paper out, folks, restorative justice, restorative justice, exactly what is that? Cognitive neuroscience, dropout prevention, something positive, I suppose. Organizational culture and climate. There it is. Oh my goodness, folks, there it is. You knew it was going to come out sooner or later with one of these ladies or one of these people in the education sector. Right now, folks, she is charged with leading the state agency that administers both state education subsidy and state and federal grant programs, which could be coming to an end because Donald Trump is going to withdraw or not even send you any federal money, Ms. Macon. And she also coordinates the authoring of the rules for Maine state education statutes passed by the Maine state legislature, provides professional development information, supports, and resources, as well as a system for educator credentialing, and leads many collaborative opportunities and partnerships in support of local schools and districts. Yike. And I mean, yike. Wow. This is not good, folks. Really not good for Ms. Macon. No, it really isn't. So we're going to move on from her, and hopefully Donald Trump will cut her off at the financial belt buckle as well. Let's hope. Speaking of Mr. Trump, our final input today, folks, we briefly go over the president's newest order to eradicate anti-Christian bias in the United States. This is a big one, folks. Citing trans and LGBTQ sentiments. And what that one is all about, folks, as we get on to the last important part of our program today, as we talk about here the fight for rights under the law, not above it. So what it said in this newsbreak.com article online, folks, and also published by the Sacramento Bee, he signed the executive order that will address what he called egregious patterns of targeting peaceful Christians, which supposedly occurred under Biden's administration. The order he signed after speaking at the National Prayer Breakfast will formally establish a task force also to eradicate anti-Christian bias, the chair of which will be the newly sworn-in Attorney General Pam Bondi. Trump's executive order is faced with anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ sentiments in which he likens the inclusion of LGBTQ rights to an attack on Christian Americans. Period. He accused the Biden administration of being hostile toward members of the Christian faith when Biden proclaimed March 31st, you recall, of 2024 to be Transgender Day of Visibility because it happened on Easter Sunday. Oh, come on. You can't tell me that that wasn't intentional. It's a coincidence. Uh-huh. Take it up with him. I don't think he liked it very much. Trump also said Biden's Equal Employment Opportunity Commission sought to force Christians to affirm radical transgender ideology against their faith. Accused the Department of Health and Human Services for driving Christians who do not conform to certain beliefs on sexual orientation and gender identity out of the foster care system. Trump wrote, "My administration will not tolerate anti-Christian weaponization of government or unlawful conduct targeting Christians." Isn't that what our entire country was founded on, folks? Last I knew it was. Besides Ms. Bondi, the task force will contain 17 other members from across the Trump administration, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, recently approved by the Senate. It has done miraculous work in the Central American countries, including the Panama Canal. The task force, though, to wrap this one up, folks, will have 2 years to review the activities of all executive departments and agencies over the previous administration and identify any unlawful anti-Christian policies and terminate or revoke any of the policies they decide are promoting anti-Christian bias. That kind of wraps it up, don't you think, folks? I mean, gotta knock it off. You know, here's something we'd like to finish with, folks. Christians have always been a part of the world, not just the United States of America. There's a few billion of us. Here's one of the most famous ones, Billy Graham. Now, you see, folks, let's take this a little bit further personally for those of you out there who are not necessarily fond of this country or the fact that Donald Trump won the election in 2024. Well, gee, that's too bad. You have to grow up about it and be a real adult. What am I talking about? I'm talking about how to connect it with Christianity and the way things should be. Just like vacation land is what it should be in Maine, but it isn't currently. It's being run by a pigpen despot dictator. But I digress. I'm sure everybody knows who Franklin Graham is, who's the founder not only of Samaritan's Purse, but many other organizations. And the point I'm making here is really quite simple, folks. He's the son of Billy Graham. He also has, I believe, a daughter and another son. I'm not sure about the second son. As far as Franklin Graham is concerned, I think he was well educated on what he should do, not only as a pastor, but dedicate his life to doing what our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, came to earth for. Not to be served, but to serve others. And that's the way we're going to leave it, folks. You can make up your own mind when it comes to all of these things that are happening around our state and around our country, mostly for the better. As always, we'd like you to stay in touch with us, folks, this way. Fairness in Reporting Media through rumble.com/fairnessmedia1, and also with our emails. Contact us anytime, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at fairnessinreportingmedia@gmail.com, fairnessinreportingmedia@gmail.com. Thank you again for joining us, folks. To everybody out there, stay safe. Peace to all.